What's up? As I started this video, it smells like my house might be on fire, which I feel like I should probably look into, but stats is life, yo. No time to waste. So let's jump in here. Today's focus: independent disjoint events. Ultimately, the question I give we look at two events: are they independent, disjoint, neither or both? I'll tell you right off the bat. The answer is never both. No events can be both independent and disjoint. Impossible. Don't pick that answer. Let's try to figure out why and look at what these words mean. So here we go. Independent. Independent means the outcome of one trial the outcome of one trial doesn't influence the outcome of another. When I flip a coin one time, right, maybe it's heads, that has no impact on what the next coin flip's going to be, right? They're independent events. In other words, the probabilities don't change, right? Like if I walk up to a roulette table, the probability that that roulette wheel lands on red, right, is 18 out of 38 on the first spin. The next time I play, on the second spin, probability it lands on red is still 18 out of 38, right? So the probability that spinner lands on red, that roulette wheel lands on red, is always 18 out of 38. That probability never changes. Those are independent events. Not all events are independent, but many are, right? Rolls of a die are independent. Spins of a spinner, spins of a roulette wheel, right? A lot of the common things that we see and we work with in probability. But sometimes events aren't independent. For example, right? If we're, classic probability here, drawing marbles out of a bag. So there's two possibilities, right? So let's say we have a bag of marbles here. Let's say we pull out two blacks. I'm pretty sure that this one with a red X in it, why would I do that, right? That's supposed to be a black, right? So here, there's 10 marbles in the bag. Probability the first marble is black is 2 out of 10. Now, if I put the first marble back in, when I go to draw the second marble, there's still 10 in the bag and there's still 2 blacks, right? The probability of black did not change. So here we're talking independent events. This would be what we call with replacement, right? That just means we put the thing back. We literally replaced it, right? We put it back in the bag. However, if I look at a situation where we're drawing marbles from a bag without replacement, we don't put the marble back in the bag. The probability that the first marble is black is 2 out of 10, right? 2 blacks out of 10 marbles. Take it out. But now, like, it's in my hand. So now there's not 10 marbles in the bag, there's 9. And maybe, right, there's not 2 blacks in the bag, there's only 1 because the other one's in my hand right here. So if we don't put the marble back, these probabilities change, right? What happened the first time affects what's going to happen the second time, right? What I took out of the bag first changes the probability or affects what I'm going to take out second. So here, when we're working without replacement, right, we don't have independent events. And that's generally true, right? If you're doing anything without replacement, the probabilities are not independent because the denominator, at least, is always changing. In a casino, many games deal with independent trials, like craps, right? You're rolling dice, or a roulette wheel we've looked at, right? Slot machines. There are some games where you can be more strategic. Like, for instance, I'm sure you've heard of card counting, right? Blackjack. Blackjack is one of the games, right? So every game in a casino, you're more likely to lose than you are to win. If you weren't, like, they wouldn't make billions of dollars, right? It's designed that way. Blackjack is one of the few games where you can start to get those odds pretty close to 50-50 because you can play strategically and count cards theoretically, right? And the reason you can do that is because blackjack is played without replacement. I can start to figure stuff out because if I see the person next to me has an ace, I know it's less likely that I have an ace or something, right? Or if I see the person next, or I guess I'm just going to say the same thing. But the point is, right, if I can see the cards that are around me that are dealt, that then affects what cards I might have that are hidden or what the dealer might have, right? And so I can use that information, that without replacement situation, to then adapt my strategy. And so that's why blackjack becomes a beatable game, because you're dealing cards without replacement. Or we could say the game has memory. Thinking about independence. So this is actually something I saw at a casino. So you can play video roulette or real roulette. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I'm like a conspiracy theorist. I don't think so. But like, I'm like skeptical that all the electronic games are rigged. So if you go to a roulette table, these probably have these at the regular roulette tables too. A lot of times you'll walk up and you'll see this information. And so they'll look at, like, over here on the right side, this like vertical string of numbers. These are like the numbers that have just come up, right? The last spin was 8, the one before that was a 1. This is maybe in the past 24 hours, the percent that were red, the percent that were black, percents, evens, and odds, and so on. These are the hot numbers, right? These are the numbers that have maybe come up most frequently in the last day, the cold numbers. Now, as you're thinking about this, hopefully you realize all this information is irrelevant, right? This has nothing to do with what happens when I play roulette because spins of the wheel are independent. Like, I don't care if the last 10 spins were all ones. That doesn't mean I should avoid a 1. The probability the next spin is a 1 is 1 out of 38. Probability it was a 1 this time was 1 out of 38. Probability it was a 1 this time was 1 out of 38, right? It's always the same. This is kind of tricking people, making people think they can play this game strategically. Think, oh man, I could see blacks or whatever. I could see this red. Red's been coming up more often than I would expect, right? I only expect red 18 out of 38, 47% of the time. So I think red's going to cool down, right, and get down to that 47%. Like nah. The probability the spin is red is always 18 out of 38. So this is an example where someone who doesn't understand that spins of the wheel are independent can, right, psychologically kind of be tricked into thinking they're playing roulette strategically, right? So there's a lot of psychology involved, right? We got to try to keep people at our casino blowing all their money so we could take it from them. But really, now that we know stats, we know this is all irrelevant. Like, who cares if this is a hot number? When I go to play my roulette game, when I put down my bet, probability of 25, 1 out of 38. Probability of 35, 1 out of 38. So on and so forth. Probability it's an 8, 1 out of 38, right? Doesn't matter what happened. The last 24 hours, the previous spin, doesn't matter what happens on the next spin. It's not like the roulette wheel knows, like, oh man, I'm a little low on blacks. I should probably land on black this time, right? Like, no, garbage. Get out of here. All right. This is playing into people's desire to apply the law of averages. So the law of averages is the idea that some outcome will eventually be due, right? And that is not true for independent events. This is trying to get people to think, right, that at some point some number is going to be due. Like, oh man, 1 came up a few times, twice in the last 5 spins. So like 1 probably won't come up again, right? That's playing into people's gut instinct to want to believe in the law of averages. But we know now, at least, if events are independent, that's not real. I don't know. I forgot how to speak English, right? Like, what this is saying is, if I flip a coin and it's heads, and I flip it again and it's heads, and I flip it again and it's heads, and I flip it again and it's heads, right? That's not that likely, 0.5 to the 4th, but it's not that crazy either. The next flip is not due to be tails for independent events, right? The probability this is tails is 1/2, right? It has nothing to do with what happened on these previous 4 flips. So this, right, does not apply to independent events. Now, can you think about where an outcome could be due? That's a pretty long pause. Think about those marbles, right? If we have dependent events, this could happen, right? Like, if I want to look at the probability I draw an ace, right? 4 aces out of 52 cards. Let's say I draw 48 cards and none are aces. Well, that means there's only 4 cards left in the deck, right? Because there was 52 to start, minus I took out 48 of them. And like, if none of them are aces, that means there's only 4 aces left too. So like, now I'm due to get an ace. But this is not dealing with independent events if we're taking out cards and not putting them back. So sure, something can be due if events are dependent, but with independent events, this law of averages, bogus, garbage. You hear this a lot with sports, right? So you'll see like a basketball player slumping, whatever. So they're like due to have a good game, right? And, you know, we can kind of debate whether we think a basketball player's performance from one game to the next independent or dependent, but, right, just be aware, not true for independent events. Disjoint events. So disjoint events, which also, right off the bat, disjoint is the same thing as mutually exclusive. So these are synonyms. Both are used pretty interchangeably, especially in the AP exams. Like, you got to know both. Disjoint, mutually exclusive, they're the same thing. And so if events are disjoint or if events are mutually exclusive, it means they have no outcomes in common. For example, if I jump down to here, right, this idea of no outcomes in common. If the event is the sum of 2 dice is odd, then my sample space would be not 1, because you can't get a sum of 1, but 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. right? Those are all possible sums of two dice that are odd. Whereas if the sum of two dice is 12, that sample space is literally just the 12. So when we look down here, right, there are no outcomes in common. There are no numbers that overlap. Whoops, my bad. There are no numbers that overlap, right, in these two different sample spaces. So these are disjoint events. Another way to think about this disjoint, right, no overlap, or you could think, right, both events can't happen, right? They both cannot happen. I know that's not the best grammar, right? But like if I roll two dice, I can't get an odd and a 12, right? Both of those things cannot occur. Get out of my way, screen sharing thingy, right? So these both can't happen, a 12 and an odd. And if both things cannot happen at the same time, but if in general both things cannot happen, that means they are disjoint. They are mutually exclusive. Or like here, right? On Tuesday, Carafano votes for Biden, Carafano votes for Trump. Can't do both, right? There's no way I can vote for Biden and Trump. Can't do both, no outcomes in common. These are disjoint or mutually exclusive events. So that's the idea, right? A common picture you see, like pretty much any stat book, if you open it, look up the word disjoint or mutually exclusive, you're going to see a definition that looks like this with a Venn diagram, event A, event B. There's no overlap, right? There are no things in common. There's never a section, right, where they both happen, right? That doesn't exist up here. They both don't happen. So to finish up, let's just take a look at some examples here and try to think, are these events independent, disjoint, neither, or both? These ideas are going to start to apply to some of the probability formulas we'll look at moving forward, aside from just being vocab we have to know, right? Well, that's never the answer. Events can't be both because if I know they're disjoint, then they're like pretty much related, right? So like independent would suggest, let's kind of just focus on events X and Y here in green. So independent would be like, if I told you about the result of event X, that would not change the probability of event Y. But these are disjoint events. If I tell you that the sum was odd, there's no way that the sum was 12. So these are like dependent, right? So events can never be both disjoint and independent. If they're disjoint, knowing information about one allows us to know kind of exactly what happened with the other. I feel like that was pretty poorly worded, but like hopefully that helped a little bit. Or just they can never be both. But I never want you to just memorize stuff for no reason. Anyways, when I go through these, my thought process, I start with disjoint. Can they both happen? All right, so if I draw one card from a deck, is it possible I draw a diamond? And just in case you don't know, a diamond is that, and it's red. Can I draw a black card and draw a black card? Can I do both of these? So the first thing I like to think about is disjoint. Well, let's see here. Can I draw a diamond and a black card? Why would I underline black card in red? That's confusing, right? No, I cannot do both because diamonds are by definition red. So here, right, can't do both of those things. There are no outcomes in common. There's no overlap between diamond and black ones. Here, these would just be spades and clubs. Here, these would just be diamonds, right? There's no overlap between these two circles. Those are all different things, or whatever's easier for you, right? I can't draw both a diamond and a black card, which means these are disjoint or mutually exclusive, right? Synonyms. And then like, I'm done. I don't have to go through the rest of the thought process because I already know they're disjoint, and there's no way they're both. Whereas if you look here, now let's say we draw two cards. And I should have defined this in the question. Let's say we draw two cards without replacement, right? Because that's how most card games are played, right? Like I don't give you a card and then take it back. So let's look at event first card drawn as an ace. Second card drawn as an ace. So I take a card out. We're thinking about the probability that's an ace. Maybe it's 4 out of 52. Right, and then we look at probably the second card's an ace. So kind of going through my thought process, like, are these disjoint? No, they're not disjoint because I can do both, right? I know do both's not one word, but I'm too lazy to erase it. I can do both, right? I can have my first card be an ace, and I can have my second card be an ace. I can do both. These are not disjoint. Now let's think, are they independent? Well, let's see. If I draw an ace the first time, does that change the probability I draw an ace the second time? Yes, it does, right? The probability I draw an ace the first time is 4 out of 52. Probability I draw an ace the second time is maybe 4 out of 52 if there's still 4 aces left. I'm sorry, is maybe 4 out of 51 if I didn't take an ace the first time. Or maybe it's 3 out of 51 if I did take an ace the first time. But either way, right, the denominator is going to be 51. So our probability has changed. So these are not independent because what happens on the first card affects what's going to happen on the second card. So they're not disjoint, they're not just independent. The answer is never both. So these would be neither independent nor disjoint. How about here? Roll 2 dice and the sum is 8. So like the you and I matter. Like you roll 2 dice at home and the sum is 8. I rolled 2 dice right here and the sum is 8. Let's think. All right, so are they disjoint? No, they're not disjoint. Both of those things can happen, right? You can roll an 8 at home and I can roll an 8 right here. Or you can roll an 8 and then I can stand next to you and roll the same dice and I can roll an 8. Are they independent? Well, let's think. Let's say you roll 2 dice and you get an 8. Probability of that? Well, that'd be fun to figure out. What are the number of different ways you can get an 8 out of the 36 possible combinations? Think about that sometime when you're bored, or like right now. Maybe pause the video. But anyways, right? If you sit here, right, you roll 2 dice, the sum is 8. Now it's my turn. I roll 2 dice. Did you getting an 8 affect the probability that I got an 8? Nah, because rolls of dice are independent, right? Your dice have no impact on mine. So these would be independent events. And lastly, hopefully whatever was in my teeth isn't on the video. Rains at 10 a.m., baseball game at 2 o'clock. What do you think? They're not disjoint because both of them can happen, right? It can rain at 10, and they could clear up at 10:15, and we could play baseball at 2, sure. Are they independent? If it rains at 10, does that change the chance the game is played at 2? Probably. If it rains at 10, it's probably a little less likely the game is played at 2. Who knows? Maybe it'll rain all day, right? Maybe the field's all wet or something, right? But it probably does have some impact on the probability the game is played at 2, right? We're assuming these are in the same day. So these are probably not independent because raining at 10 probably does change the likeliness the game is played at 2. And so here we have another neither situation. I think that's it, right? Yeah, that's it. So one more video coming up soon about formal probability, but for now, you're going to do some practice here. You're going to look at some events in Delta Math and decide, are they independent, disjoint, neither or both? Neither or both. Have a great day.